Hello again. Chris Lee and Alfred Ezman here of Southeastern 14 to bring you a preview of the Athens Regional featuring Georgia, UNC Wilmington, Georgia Tech, and Army. And you have no idea the trouble we have been through to make this happen. But we will get into that. We're going to get into the teams, though. And this is an interesting matchup. We will talk about each of the teams. We'll give you a prediction at the end. Before we do that, reminder, BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, the NBA, and NHL playoffs. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in all the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We will start with the Georgia Bulldogs and this beauty of a graphic we've made. But don't focus on the artwork here. Focus on the numbers and look at those slugging percentages and those home run numbers and those walk rates. And my goodness, this team was a pain to pitch to. Georgia all year captured headlines. It wasn't just Charlie Condon. It was Corey Collins, who had a 600 on base percentage for a minute, I think, and is near there going to the regional. They've got power pretty much at every spot in the lineup. Trey Phelps, their DH, probably would have hit 20 home runs that he played the whole year, the pace he was on. This team mashed at every spot in the order, and I don't think anybody is going to want to pitch to the Georgia Bulldogs this postseason. Not that they did during the season either.
No, and, as you said, the slugging percentage is just through the roof right now. Everyone except Sebastian Murillo down there in the substitution spot above 400 or like 400 or more, and the on-base percentages are off the charts. They don't really strike out that much either, relatively speaking, for how much they hit and how much power they have too, Chris, if you look at it. I mean, there's a few percentages over 20. Slade Alford's over 20. Dylan Carter on the bench is over 20, but that's really it beyond that. And honestly, it's gotten them this far. I looked it up. They're 6th in RPI right now, which is tops in the country behind some of the top seeds. And, they don't have a whole lot to complain about. They got a national seed out of it. They didn't have the Hoover they wanted, but looking back on it, that LSU team was had a lot more in the bag than just beating Georgia that tournament. Yeah. So, not necessarily their fault by any means. And this team's all about offense, and it's going to be a pain for Wilmington, Tech, and Army to pitch to this team.
Yeah, and Georgia's pitching struggled a lot at times, but you dig in and there's some things here. Colton Smith, I think, struck out 100 guys this year. You look at that strikeout rate, 36%, didn't walk a lot of guys. He's a nice little weapon to have at your disposal. ERA should have probably been better than the 440. Jarvis Evans had an okay year. Leighton Finley, the righty, really came on late in the year and went deep into some starts. Zach Harris presumably would be their 3. Now, the bullpen after that, that's where they struggle. Brian Zeldin, the transfer from Penn, did some good things at times. Look, when you're Georgia and you're scoring 15 runs a game, like it seemed like they did when they got on the heater, you just have to be not awful to get some wins. I think the question for Georgia will be, maybe after Finley and Smith, is there enough in the tank elsewhere to get the Bulldogs where they want to go?
Yeah, and the interesting games for them this tournament, not only this Athens Regional, is going to be, once they run into another offense that's maybe not as good as them, but just as potent as theirs. What is that game going to look like? Because we don't necessarily know if they have the pitching to match. And I told you, Chris, before we got on here, look at the handiness of the pitchers that we at least got listed. It's all righties, and maybe they can get by with it against Wilmington and Army and whatnot, but we'll have to see going forward if that holds steady as well. But nonetheless, Georgia is one of the most explosive, if not the most explosive offensive team in all of college baseball. And they're just a headache flat out. And they're going to be a nightmare for teams to play.
Charlie Goldstein, their lefty, could have really helped them. He got hurt a couple of weeks ago. I don't think he's coming back. I probably should have checked that, but I watched that. Looked like one of those injuries you don't want to have happen. So if Charlie Goldstein by chance pitches this regional, then Georgia's got another quality lefty there. But I'm presuming he's going to be out if he's not been ruled out for the year. All right, moving on to UNC Wilmington. I have not seen them play. you guys probably know if you're watching, we're an SEC channel. We have seen plenty of SEC baseball and followed some of the other teams at a distance. This was not one that I really followed. So, Alfred, I'm going to lean on you for some insight here.
Yeah, looking at Wilmington, champions of the CAA, Colonial Athletic, tough conference.
Coastal now.
Coastal.
They
I'm sorry.
changed
Yes.
the name.
Silly me. Coastal. But tough conference. Kind of a cool story from that conference. Charleston got snubbed. A lot of people said that was a tough team they had to face. That's just a little side note. But this UNC Wilmington team, looking at them, one thing that's the major thing that stood out to me when I looked at their pitching, they seemed to lean on that a little bit, and it's the home runs. They did not let a lot of balls out. If you look at it, a lot of their pitchers with low home run rates. There's a few high ones. I think that's Ryan Calvert with a 4.1% there, but he did have a high strikeout rate, so that's a little trade-off he has for it, and that's key. This team's going to be playing in Foley Field, which is a park where the ball travels, and I think that's going to be very key. It's a key thing to look at for them. And going back up to their lineup, seeing what they have, they like to strike out a lot. Their lineup. You look at the 20%, 33% down at the bottom. That's Kyle Dobbs coming off the bench. Alec DeMartino, 29% as well. They walk a good bit as well. You see a lot of walk rates in the double figures, but overall, this team, it's a tough little too. I think just because they do not let you hit the home run ball, they want to keep you right within striking distance the entire game and don't let you extend this league. The leads that you have, that it's kind of like the opposite of what I'll compare them to Georgia, since we just talked about them. It's kind of the opposite of what Georgia provides against teams where they hit the home run ball and they run up the scoreboard. And so it's an interesting matchup. It's a clash of opposing personalities team wise, and Wilmington's going to be a team that's going to lean on their pitching, I think, a lot.
Yeah, Georgia Tech is not going to lean on its pitching a lot.
No.
Speaking of teams that really hit the ball and have some questions with pitching, meet Georgia Tech. The name if you followed college baseball this year, Drew Burress, who just went on home run benders this year at a 5.06 slugging percentage, true freshman, or at least a freshman. I think he's a true freshman. They had help other places. No, look, that park, and I've been there, plays very hitter friendly. And so it's probably, in fact, it's more hitter friendly park in terms of park factors than Foley Field, which isn't as much of a hitter's park as I would have thought. It's a bit of a home run park, especially if you got a bunch of lefties in the lineup, which Georgia Tech in this case does not have. It's got right-handed heavy lineup here that we're looking at. But I think it inflates runs by about 20%. So take that into consideration when you're looking at the offensive numbers and when you're looking at the pitching numbers here. But Burress was the headliner for Tech this year. Catcher Matthew Ellis also hit 16 home runs. Again, it's a lineup that walks a lot. Feels like that's been a kind of a hallmark of Georgia Tech, just big offenses and guys that hit bombs and get on base a lot the last few years. Now, the pitching, starting rotation, not great. I guess you could see maybe Cam Jones, who looks like their best starter, go against Georgia if Georgia and Georgia Tech advance in those winners brackets. You could see a meeting there, depending if this is the order they're going to go with or not. But a lot like Georgia, in that you've got a great hitting lineup, but the pitching, once you get past a couple of arms, is a little suspect.
Yeah, the strikeout rates and the pitching staff are high for them, it seems. But, once again, we see that trade-off all the time. Look at the home run rates next to it. That's a lot. And especially if you're going up against Georgia, a team that crushes the ball with their slugging. And just to tease the idea and entertain the idea of that Georgia Tech rivalry matchup we could possibly get in the winners bracket. Looking back on them earlier this season, they met at the very beginning of March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd that weekend. The first game Friday canceled because of rain. Second game, or the next two games, Georgia both won 3-1 and then 11-9. That 11-9 game was at Coolray Field in Lawrenceville. Weird neutral site matchup that they had with one another. But Georgia took both games, but they were close. So maybe, there's more to, like, a lot of people I saw on socials and stuff were saying this regional was pretty easy for Georgia. Maybe there's more to it than that just because of the matchups. But I mean, looking at both Georgia Tech and Georgia, similar teams, that's why the scores were so close. So maybe we could get a good game out of it. But Georgia Tech's going to have to face Wilmington first. And like I said about Wilmington, they have that pitching that keeps home runs from getting out. So guys like Drew Burress are going to have their work cut out for them in that lineup. That'll be an interesting first 2 and 3 game in Athens.
Yeah, and I want to say that game that got rained out, Georgia had a lead in, and that just one got canceled later. They decided they couldn't make it up. I could be wrong about that. I'm sure people will let me know in the comments if I'm wrong about that. But let's move on to Army. And look, we're not going to spend a ton of time telling you how Army can win this regional because I don't think that's going to happen. But I am going to give you some stuff as we fill these out. That's kind of interesting. First of all, finding the handedness of some of these guys was a challenge. They don't list it on the website, picked it up other places. I guess when you deal with the Army, a lot of things are top secret, including which way your kids pitch and bat. You never know when that's going to come in handy. But, boy, when these kids did pitch, look at that pitching staff. Look at how it kept the ball in the park. Now, look, they've got about 5 or 6 arms, and it drops off a cliff after that. Yeah, and I think Army's ballpark is fairly run neutral. So I was looking at this and thinking they must play in some kind of a park, where it's cold weather and the fences are, 375 down the lines or something crazy. But that's not the case. I think they play in a fairly neutral ballpark, but they kept the ball in the yard. Pretty good ERAs from their top 5 or 6 guys. So I'm just kind of curious here. And a little power, too. You got 3 guys with at least 13 home runs. Now, outside the 3 or 4 guys that hit home runs, nobody's got any pop in this lineup. They'll run a little bit, but very interesting because in baseball, man, one game can really screw up a regional. And I don't know if Army can throw a combination of guys in the opener to keep this one interesting, get it to extra innings. To hold Georgia down, maybe even pull an upset. You do see 1 or 2 of these every year, and the construction of the Army staff here is kind of interesting because you look at the ERAs, the runners per inning. They don't strike out a lot of guys, but the ball doesn't leave the yard against these guys either, and that is what Georgia thrives on.
Yeah, they certainly have a weird makeup, like you said, Chris, both with their pitching staff and lineup. When I look at the lineup, I think it's going to be very easy for Georgia to kind of circle who they're going to watch out for just based on the double-digit home runs and stolen bases, like Derek Berg up there at the top, their catcher. William Parker, their left fielder. He's a big home run stolen base guy as well. So that's going to be pretty easy. As for their pitching, that's going to be a story to watch just to see what they exactly do with it facing Georgia. Because like you said, they keep the ball in the yard, and their top guy right here, Justin. Oh, is that Lehman? Is that it right there?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's very small. Lehman. Justin Lehman. He doesn't allow a whole ton of base runners on, per inning. Just 1.2, a little over 1 there. So it'll be interesting to see what they throw out. Again, like you said, I don't think Army's coming out on top and going to a super regional by any means, but I think they kind of provide a weird look for the Georgia Bulldogs, I guess, just the start, and even the other teams they'll play later on.
Yeah, the question I'd like to know is, do they have any lefties in the pen in case they get in a spot where they need one? Again, everything we had that where we could find out where a guy was a lefty or righty, they were righties. But just something to think about. Look, Georgia is the heavy favorite in this regional. And for good reason. Georgia was a team that I thought deserved a national seed. I've been high on Georgia all year, saying I think people are sleeping on this team a little bit. But, had a tougher run in Hoover. The Charlie Goldstein injury, I think, is one that could come back and bite them a little bit. And after really, I guess Finley and Evans, or excuse me, Colton Smith, I have some questions. Do they have enough of a bullpen? You got Brian Zeldin was a kid who felt like he was losing some effectiveness late in the year. Josh Roberge, same thing. So, but on the other hand, not a lot of pitching heavy teams in this regional. I think Wilmington is the interesting one, as you pointed out. Between Luke Craig out of the bullpen, do they go with RJ Sales or Zane Taylor against Georgia? Those are guys who had good years. This is not a matchup. I know Georgia was perceived to have the easiest region out there, but you got some interesting dynamics here in an Army that's a little more pitching heavy than a lot of 4s would tend to be, and it's going to run out at some point, right? I don't think Army's got enough in the regional, but it might have enough to make Friday night interesting. And, Georgia Tech can hit bombs with Georgia, even though they went Georgia's way in the regular season. You never know. But I think Wilmington, I think the path for somebody winning this one other than Georgia would be for Army to push Georgia, maybe take one on an upset on Friday night, and perhaps running into Wilmington in a winner's bracket game where Wilmington is unbeaten and they've got some pitching left. Again, I'm not necessarily buying it, but we try to look at all angles, and that's one that sticks out a little bit.
Yeah, the dynamic switch ups are there, I think, in this. I think my major note I have for this regional is I don't think it wasn't as easy. I don't think it's as cakewalk as it once seemed when Georgia got announced to be in this, just because of the team names. I think when you dive into the teams, they provide a little bit more substance, you know what I mean, to what you're looking at. And especially with Wilmington, I think that pitching, certainly provides a challenge to Georgia's lineup. But I do think in the end, I think with Georgia just playing at Foley Field, being at home, having the kind of offensive year they had, I know their pitching handiness is a little weird, especially without Goldstein, depending on what happens with that. As of right now, I do think Georgia, though, walks out of here with a regional win. Could possibly drop a game. Wouldn't necessarily bet a lot on it, though. So either way, I'm going with the Dogs, making a super regional.
Road records: Georgia Tech 9-11 on the road, 0-3 at home. Wilmington, if I can find them, want to see what they did. 13-10 on the road, 4-0 neutral. So some teams, Wilmington in particular, with a little bit of experience playing on the road. And on Georgia, on the other hand, 29-5 at home. And I think lost a couple of those late. It felt like a team that started to run out of a little bit of steam late. Again, didn't play great in Hoover, but I think you kind of got to go with Georgia to win the regional, and that's where I'm going to go.
I am as well, yes. Keep in mind, too, because we're doing road records, Army, 11-8 on the road. They do have a winning record on the road, so something to watch out for. But like I said, I'm with you on them. Maybe they have the pitching for a game, but I don't know if it'll last beyond that with the Black Knights.
Yeah, I think Georgia eventually gets everybody into 16-12 type games, and it just feels like, other than Florida, which did get them in some, and that Florida's the team that won the series in Athens late in the year. That's where Georgia started to run out of steam a little bit. So keep an eye on some things there. This may not be quite as clear cut as it was made out to be, but still, we'll take Georgia to win it. And I think it's feels like one of the safer picks out there, even though, again, we pointed out some landmines. All right, we'll be back to discuss all these. We're going to preview all the regionals involving SEC teams. I think we've got a separate video for all the teams that are hosting regionals, and I think we're going to do all the ones that are going on the road in one video. Those will be a little briefer. We will be recapping these games every day. Best way to get that, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. That helps our analytics. For Alfred Ezman, I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 14, presented by BetOnline.